So the next speaker is Bob Caporale. I've known Bob for about 7 years. He was a client. He's now the president of my company, Sequent Learning Networks, and he's been a corporate leader in a multi-billion-dollar firm. He is a remarkable facilitator. He's very, very creative. He's got a keyboard in his office, and he plays music for us sometimes. But he's a composer, and he's an author of the book Creative Strategy Generation. Today, Bob is going to show you how to tap into your creativity to produce your next product and business strategy. I'd like you to give a warm welcome to Bob Caporale.
Thank you. Thank you, Stephen. Such a nice introduction. So thank you for having me here. It's great to be here. How's everybody feeling this morning? Good? Energized? Yeah? Ready to talk about strategy? Ready to talk about strategy? Yeah! Too bad, because we're not going to talk about strategy at all. We're not, in fact, going to talk only about strategy. What's really going to happen is we're going to talk about this subject that Stephen talked more about, which is creativity. And I want to just kind of do a little survey of the room quickly, just to kind of show a hopefully illustrative point. How many people here have developed a strategy? Show of hands. Okay, a good amount of the room. Those of you who did not raise your hands, how many people have had some type of an objective they want to go after and put some plan in place to go after that objective, whether it's formal or not? Hands? So a lot more people raising their hands. The problem is that usually we get actually less people in the room that think that they developed a strategy, and then more people that will actually raise their hand on the second question. And the reason for that is that we somehow have been tricked into believing that strategy has to be some type of a formal academic process, right? That it's something that you have to learn about in school. And if you don't wear that badge of honor, then you don't have the privilege or the right to do a strategy. And sometimes we get confused about this inside of our corporate jobs. If I asked, I won't ask this, but so many of us, I've been accused of this a million times in my career. You're too tactical. Has anybody heard this? Too tactical. You're not strategic enough, right? And so we don't always know what that means, but we're being told something, we're reprimanded in some way. We're not doing something we should be doing because we haven't followed the textbook. We haven't followed the framework, right? So if you go back to where strategy comes from, anybody know where strategy comes from, the word strategy? No? Somebody? Yeah.
Strategos, great word, means general or the art of making war.
Perfect. He went right to the etymology of the word, which is excellent. It basically comes from the knowledge you would need to lead a multitude of people, right? And back to a military analogy. Millennia ago, when a general was going out onto the battlefield, and what were they doing? They had to go after some goal, and they needed a plan to be able to do that. But they weren't following the textbook necessarily. Sometimes it wasn't even a formal plan. What they were really doing was assessing the situation, knowing what they have to go after, and coming up with some plan to reach their goal based on all the obstacles that they had to go past, right? So they're tapping into what? They were tapping into their creativity. And here's the other thing, is that while they were going after that goal, their enemy was spending time doing what? They were spending time trying to figure out what that general was going to do, because they wanted to stand in between the general and the goal. And if you could figure it out what they were going to do, then you can't get to the goal. If they couldn't figure it out, then you could, right? So it wasn't just about coming up with a plan. It was coming up with a plan that would enable you to achieve that goal in a way that was different, unique, something that somebody else maybe couldn't really figure out, right? Now there's different variations of that, but that's something that I think is really important. Now somewhere along the way when we translated this into the business world, which we've only done in the last century, maybe the 40s or 50s, and you can see where the analogy would take place in the business world, right? Because very simple, same thing, you have a goal, someone's in your way, and you need to achieve that goal. And so somewhere along the way, we wrote a lot of textbooks on it. We made it into classes and study, and that's all great. I'm not saying anything bad about that, but we may have lost a little bit of that creativity that we need to tap into, something unique. And so that's really what I want to talk to you about today. So Stephen gave you some of my business pedigree, and yes, I spent 20 years in the corporate world. I ran product management teams, marketing teams, engineering teams. I ran business units for large corporations. I now do corporate facilitation. I teach product management, product strategy, product marketing to some of the largest companies in the world. So you could read all about that, and my business pedigree is probably at least well known. You could say, okay, the guy can talk about some of that stuff, right? But why is he qualified to talk about creativity? So to tell you why I think I'm a little bit qualified to talk about creativity, sorry about that, I want to let you know that all of that stuff that I just named, all of my kind of business profile, that's actually my plan B. All right, what I'm doing right now is my plan B. This wasn't what I intended to do when I was 14, 15 years old. All right. In fact, my plan A looked something like that. Now, why is that funny? That's me. This, by the way, is what Plan B does to you. It takes your hair away, apparently. But I was going to be a rock star. I was going to be a musician, composer, writer, songwriter, keyboardist. You see the bandanas on my hands? That was like the 80s and 90s, so that's what we did. But that was totally my plan A. And somewhere along the way, life got in the way, totally by choice. I went to school. I got an engineering degree, right? So all that stuff happened. But I never gave up my plan A. By the way, how many people are actually living their plan A right now in this room? So a good handful of people, right? But most of us not. Most of us not. Who wants to yell out what your plan A was? Who wants to share a plan A? What was your plan A? Don't be shy.
Gamer.
Helicopter pilot. What else? Gamer? Can you make a living at that? Why not, right? What else? Any other plan A's? Come on. Any actors in the room? Yeah? Awesome. Any musicians, composers, other rock stars? Yeah, come see me after the show. And it is a show. Here's the thing though, most of the time when you talk to people about their plan A, what they wanted to do, right, from when they were a kid, it has something to do with their passion. It has something to do with being uniquely you, right? Doing something that is creative. We would talk about it being creative. And here's the problem is that a lot of times we don't think that we can mix our plan A and our plan B. Like plan A, that's in the past now, so now I'm living my plan B, and there's no way that I can do both of those things. And in fact, that wasn't the way I approached my life, right? I didn't know this at the time, but my plan A, I continued to pursue while I was pursuing my corporate career. At some point, I realized I'm not going to be a rock star. It was about like this morning I realized it. But the truth of the matter is that what ended up happening with my plan A is I incorporated elements of what I did in music into business. And I didn't even know that I knew that I was doing it. So I got into strategy pretty early. I developed product strategies for my whole career. I developed business strategies, and they were very successful. All right. Again, I won't go into all of the details on that, but I had a lot of success in that area. And here's the secret, right? The dirty little secret. I don't share this a lot, but I don't have an MBA. I didn't go to business school. I never studied strategy, ever, in school, all right? I wrote a book on it, and I felt like I had to hide that fact for a long time. My God, there's no way anybody's going to accept me writing a book on strategy, but I never went to school for it, right? Anybody ever feel this way, by the way? Yeah? Don't. Because you don't need a degree for strategy. Again, I'm not saying that it's bad. MBAs are great, learning, fantastic. I do it for a living. But it's not the only thing. And the success I was having in strategy actually had more to do with my plan A than my plan B. Because what I realized what I was doing was I wasn't applying a strategic process that I learned somewhere. I wasn't applying a framework that I learned somewhere. I was actually using the same process that I used to compose music, to do my creative world. And that's where the success was coming from. You see, here's the real trick. When we talk about knowing how to do a strategy, a lot of times we think about picking up a book, using a framework that somebody said, will give you the same kind of strategy that Apple has, or IKEA, or Amazon, or all these other companies that we talk about, Uber, all these breakthrough companies. And we're led to believe that that's the framework we should use, but it's very imitative, isn't it? Because how many of those companies, or any of the other really successful ones that you know of, how many of their stories start with, I opened up a textbook and followed this framework? I mean, really, let's think about it, right? Very, very few, if any. They start with observation, intuition, tapping into creativity and doing something that nobody did before. That's strategy. And to do that, I feel like what you really should be tapping into is a creative process. So what I'm going to talk to you about today is that. It's going to be about creativity. So we have to understand a little bit about what the essence of creativity is, all right? So I'm not a psychologist necessarily, but I have observed a lot of creative people. I've interviewed a lot of creative people, and I, again, consider myself to be a creative people. And one of the things I think that separates creativity is understanding that there are two parts to it, all right? A lot of people will talk about the first part, that creativity is about having great ideas, all right? Great new ideas in many cases. People kind of agree with that? That's part of creativity, new ideas? How many people in the room have had great new ideas? Yeah? So, a lot, okay? How many people in the room consider themselves to be creative? Okay, good. So about the same amount. That's fantastic. Here's the thing that I've observed. Great new ideas is absolutely part of creativity. Great, unique, whatever. But it's only half the picture. The other half of the picture is expressing those ideas in a way that connects to other people, right? Because what good is the idea if it's just sitting inside of your head? It might be unique, it might be new, but it's not landing with anybody, right? You're not translating that emotion to other people. And that's where the essence of creativity really lies. So both of these things. Don't just focus on the new ideas, although we'll talk about it, it's a big part of the process, but it's about expressing those ideas in a way that connects with people. And those two areas will allow your creativity to be shared with the world, okay? So what I've done is I've created a 7-step process because, you know, when you write a book, that's what you have to do, I think, is create a 7-step process. And this is basically what it is, all right? And again, this is based on a lot of observation, a lot of experience, and I think it'll resonate with you when you hear it, and I'll go through each one of these steps. But it really continues to tap into those two areas, having great new ideas and expressing those ideas in a way that connects with people. And here are the steps to that. Preparation, inspiration, genre, ideation, arrangement, orchestration, and production. I will go through each one of these with some examples and so forth, but I will tell you to start that the first 4 pieces, preparation, inspiration, genre, and ideation, are about having the great new ideas. Because a lot of people wonder, where do ideas come from? We don't always know, all right? But I'm going to try and explore that with you a little bit today. And then the second part, which is the last 3 steps, arrangement, orchestration, and production, this is about expressing those ideas in a way that connects with people. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to step you through each one of those. And to do this in a way that I think could be interesting, I want to use a podcast that I have. And this is not necessarily a plug for the podcast. However, I do think it's a resource that a lot of people in this room will enjoy. And it's called Making It Real. So I have a podcast with a co-host, Tate Tegmar. It's a fantastic young lady that we work with at Secret Learning Networks. And basically, she and I started this podcast because we're really interested, genuinely curious, about when people have great new ideas and they're able to bring it to market, what's that formula, right? How do they do it? Because you see a lot of startups, see a lot of entrepreneurs, especially in today's environment. Go watch Shark Tank, everything else. See all these great ideas and people are kind of unafraid to start these companies. And they say, wow, having the idea is one thing, and a lot of us have had those ideas, but how many of us actually can bring them to market and make them real? And so I wanted to understand, and she wanted to understand what the formula was. So we started this podcast, and we're at some 30, 35 episodes. I highly recommend, by the way, it's all about bringing new products to market. So go out and subscribe if you're interested, and I'll give you the link at the end of the talk as well. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to use examples from that podcast because we interview entrepreneurs. We interview people who started their own companies, who had ideas for products and brought them to life. Not necessarily out of a textbook, but using their own creative process. And I think the podcast really illustrates each of these 7 steps. So I'll use that as an example as we go. Fair enough? Good? Still with me? All right, here we go. So step 1, all right, is really part 1, which is where do these where do these ideas come from? How do you come up with these great new ideas? And people who are not creative, right? I'm going to go back to music for a second. People who are not creative, are not musicians and so forth, sometimes you don't give enough credit to the people that are. You think that like great songs just come out of thin air, right? That they're, you know, just some lightning bolt hits them in the head. They're uniquely talented. Or maybe the songs are drug-induced. I don't know, like that's, some people think that. Some of them are, but that's not what we want to talk about. What we really want to talk about is where those ideas really come from. Because the truth of the matter is that these musicians, these composers, these songwriters, they spend many, 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 many years of preparation that you probably will never see. They learn their craft, they learn their instrument, they study other styles of music. Some of them study formally, composing and songwriting and so forth. And all of that forms this first step, which is about preparation, okay? That's the very first thing. Now, some of that preparation is formal, some of it's not so formal, but you have to have some foundation of knowledge to work with, right? Taking that to business, if you think about the foundation of knowledge you need to have to develop a strategy, you don't just go out there and put together a plan. You have to do some homework, all right? Sometimes that homework might include that formal study that we talked about in the beginning. But more times than not, it's going to be about sizing up your environment, just like the general would do. Understanding your customers, understanding your competitors, understanding yourself, understanding the industry and market trends that might drive all of those things, and putting that together so that you can do something with it. Preparation. You don't just jump right into the idea. If you sit in a room with other people and you just kind of brainstorm ideas, that's great. Believe me, I'm a big, big proponent of that. But if you do that without some foundation of knowledge, you're going to come up with ideas that probably won't land, right? They probably won't land. So you have to do some homework. You have to do that preparation. Now, a lot of people assume that entrepreneurs, people who start up businesses, they don't do any of this, right? Because we're in corporate jobs, and I was always in a corporate job, so I consider myself risk averse, right? People in the room, some of you feel that way? Yeah? A little bit risk averse. You know, hey, I have a family to feed. I have health insurance costs. Somebody brought that up yesterday. It's true. Like, there's things I have to do. I have responsibility. I can't just go and throw that all to the wind and then just go and start something. But those people who start companies, they must be like that, right? They must be like, as it turns out, when we talk to these people, they're not. They're not. They don't just throw caution to the wind. They're probably less risk averse than me. But they actually spend a lot of time preparing. Once they have the idea, they go out, they try and understand what the market is, right? They go to look to see if some competitor has invented what they've already invented. They go to try and understand what they're going to run into in the marketplace. What's the market trends? What's the consumer behaviors? There's a lot of homework that goes into this, right? So we interviewed a person called named Yair Rayner, or Reiner, I think, the way he pronounces his name. And he's the inventor of a product called Frywall, all right? So Frywall is a great product. Anybody do cooking, Sunday night dinner cooking? They fry things in a pan, whatever, yeah? So in my family, we do our Sunday gravy. We'll get to that too, by the way. And our Sunday gravy consists of meatballs, sausage, and so for the meatballs, you gotta fry them up. Anybody do that? Oh, yeah, yeah. I'm hungry. Fry up the meatballs, but it's a mess. It's a real mess. Okay, and so what he saw was that, you know, when people fry things, their favorite foods, they make a mess. Oil splattering all over your clothes and everything else. Like, it gets to the point, for me, when I do my Sunday dinner, I actually choose my outfit based on the fact that I know that it's going to get splattered and, you know, all kind of red sauce on it and everything else. So I wear like the worst t-shirt to my family events and things like that because I know that this is going to happen. So he said, wait, there's a better way. Now, there's splatter guards that you can put onto pans and so forth, and that helps to some extent. But actually, he said, you know, when you put those splatter guards on, you take them off, you go to fry the food, what happens? Splatter all over the place again. So he came up with this. Piece of silicone forms a cone inside your pan, and now you can fry your food, and it doesn't splatter. Pretty cool. He was one of our earlier interviews, and again, I asked him this question about, you know, wow, this is so cool. So you must like be embracing of risk, like, because I would never do something like this, just put something like this out there. And I want you to hear what he actually had to say about this.
I'm actually very risk averse.
Are you really?
Right. I'm very risk averse. But even if you're risk averse, if you see something that you think really works and your probability of success are high, you're still going to take that risk. Being risk averse doesn't mean you never take a risk. It means you take a risk when you think you have a high probability of success.
Interesting. This is from an entrepreneur, right? Who invented something that came out of his head. Being risk averse doesn't mean you never take a risk. It means you take a risk when you think you have a high probability of success, right? Now that's his definition through his lens. This is a person that's been there and done that. Pretty interesting, right? And so when you think about this, how do you take a risk when you think you have a high probability of success? Prepare. Do your homework. Understand your environment. And then you know that your plan will have a better chance to succeed. Okay? So that's step one, getting some foundation of knowledge. Step two is about inspiration. Now, inspiration is something that a lot of us think kind of comes from within. Now, I'm not going to use textbook definitions. I'm not Webster's, so I'm not going to do any of that. I'm going to give you my take on what I think inspiration really is, again, based on what I've seen and observed. So I don't believe that inspiration necessarily comes from within. I call that motivation, right? I'm motivated to lose weight. I'm motivated to make more money. I'm motivated to be a better person. It's all about kind of what I want from me. Does that resonate a little bit? Yeah? So when I'm inspired by something, it's usually something that's outside. I'm inspired to help someone. I'm inspired to make the world different, right? I'm inspired to do something for someone else. That's the way that I view it. Now, again, you can argue the definitions, official dictionary definitions, whatever else, but that just helps me to kind of think about these things. And it's really important for something like a strategic plan. Because when I see most strategic plans that companies develop, who are they about? The company, right? I want to be number one somewhere. I want to make more money, more profit, more growth. I need a strategy because we're not doing as good as we could be doing. We need to do better. Motivated. Not wrong, just motivated. When I see inspired strategies, which I see mostly in the startup world, entrepreneurs, small businesses, they see a problem they want to solve for someone, and they go and they solve it. They want to change the world in some way because the world is broken, right? There's something that's not right. How many things do you deal with every single day that are problematic? Products that just don't work? A lot, right? Show of hands, how many had a problem with a product even in the last 24 hours? Look at that. It's crazy. You know why I'm wearing this shirt today? Because I was going to put down on a button-down shirt, and I travel a lot. I do this for a living, right? So I put my button-down shirt on. Every hotel room I go into, I try and find the iron and use this. And what an ordeal it is to use an iron in a hotel room, okay? It's ridiculous. First of all, this hotel happens to have high faucets, so that's nice. Most of them, they don't, so you can't get the iron filled up with water, then you're supposed to get it filled up. Then you go and you try and find the plug, and you can't find the plug, and the cord is too short. You try and get the ironing board set up somewhere, you end up in some weird position to iron your shirts, right? You're afraid of burning down the entire building. Then you go to iron the shirt, and you start to do it, and what ends up happening? Going along nicely, and water that took you 10 minutes to get into the iron is all over your shirt now, right? And now what you have to do is start ironing it up and try and steam it out, and the minute you get it all nice and dry again, and 20 minutes later, you have this wet, almost ironed shirt. Does anybody have this? This is an iron, okay? Can we please understand what we're talking about? This is an iron. Like, who hasn't fixed this yet? And think about every product that you deal with. There's opportunities everywhere. So if you're inspired to fix some of those things, right? Make people's lives a little better, that's different. My favorite vision that I've read was the Susan G. Komen Foundation. Some of you know Susan G. Komen, right? They sponsor the breast cancer runs and so forth. And their vision statement, as I understand it, is a world without breast cancer. I mean, is there anything more inspiring than that? That's amazing. It's about other people, helping the world in some way. The companies that have inspired visions, in my estimation, actually have more success because they get rewarded whatever reward they're looking for, right? Whether it's donations or recognition or money. But they get rewarded because they're helping other people. That's what inspiration is all about. So one of the guests that we had on the show, a gentleman by the name of Adam Lazar, he's the founder of a company called Azarazi. It's a new company. And essentially what happened was he was on a field trip with his daughter going to visit a maple farm, basically a farm that makes maple syrup, okay? And a lot of people think that maple syrup, you tap the tree and you turn a spigot and out comes maple syrup in this nice gooey form and everything, right? That's what I thought, in fact. This is not the way it happens at all. When you hear someone talk about maple sap, it's actually the viscosity of water, okay? That's what happens. And then you have to, in order to get that syrup, you have to actually boil it off, distill, you know, there's other things you do. I don't know the whole process, but you compress it, pressurize it, and then you get the syrup, okay? And so he witnessed the maple farming, okay, and he saw that thousands of gallons of water were actually being dumped down the drain. This is a consumable natural resource, one of our most precious resources, pre-filtered through nature's greatest gift, trees, right, being dumped down the drain. And so let's hear what he had to say about this product that he has?
Asurasi is mission focused on being an environmental steward, is saving the groundwater table from wholesale destruction by the bottled water companies by simply taking an agricultural byproduct from the maple production process, which is maple permeate waters, and converting them to a consumer packaged good. That basically our impact is pretty substantial. So when we look at taking this byproduct, which is sugar-free maple saps, and taking them from farms that normally throw them away, we can not only convert them to something that's a saleable product like a sparkling water product, but we can advantage these maple producers to almost double their profit on their existing crops. So I like to tell people that we don't sell a bottled water. We sell a paradigm shift in the way that we think about the consumption of natural resources by giving you a bottle of water. And really trying to change the world in the way we think about the way we consume water.
It's pretty cool, huh? That's pretty cool. Nothing in there about I want to be rich. Nothing in there about I want to make this huge profit. Nothing in there about that. It's about changing the world in some way, being inspired to do that, and now come up with something different and something unique. We don't sell a bottle of water. We sell a paradigm shift in the way that we think about the consumption of natural resources. That's inspiration. So how do you apply this in your business? How do you apply this? It doesn't mean that you don't care about profit. It doesn't mean that you don't care about making money. Those are important things in the business world. But are you doing it for that sole purpose? Or are you doing it by identifying problems that people have and going out and trying to solve those? All right? This is how you can tap into more of your creativity. Okay? So let's talk about the third step. The third step has to do with what I call genre. Now, if you ask most people what genre is, they'll say some type of a style, all right? So in the world of music, jazz, heavy metal, that's what I like, by the way, I love heavy metal. Progressive rock, I like that too, that's cool. Rap, ska, reggae, styles, jazz, yeah? These are resonating? Okay, good. I actually don't see genre as a style. I see genre as a preference. This is kind of an important, subtle, but important difference. Because when I think about genre, I don't think about I'm going to play in the style of jazz. I think about I'm going to play the type of music that fans of jazz like. Why is this important? Because if I was going to play in the style of jazz, I'd be looking at every other jazz song and playing just like that. And the world of music's really interesting because your job in music is not to imitate, kind of the opposite of what we do a little bit in business. Your job in music, you can't imitate, because if you do, like I like the Beatles, okay? If I write a Beatles song, I'm gonna get sued, I'm pretty sure, right? Because it's already been done way more successfully than I could do it. So what you do is you get influenced by a whole bunch of different styles, a whole bunch of different types of music, and your job is to come up with something different. All right, in that same kind of a genre, which again, I see as a preference. And so there's a website called Every Noise at Once, I think it is, that tracks the number of different musical genres that are out there. All right, anybody want to guess what that number is? Yeah, you're up in it's 1,538 at last check, okay? And the reason for that is because it really is a preference. You look at what other people like, and then you come up with something just a little bit unique, something with a little different twist on it. And that's how music evolves. That's why music today doesn't sound anything like it did 200 years ago, because it evolves, it builds on itself, all right? That's the way that I look at genre. So when I translate this to business again, what do I think of? I think about your target audience. I think about the preferences of your target audience. Not going after an audience because you know it's going to be profitable for you, right? Every company wants to grow in Asia, for example. I can't tell you how many times I see that in strategies. We're going to grow in Asia, big market, we're not there, we're going. Okay, how are you going to do it? We're going to just go. Like, you mean how we're going to do it? We're going to show up, and everyone's going to buy our stuff, just like they did here in North America. Anybody hear this strategy, by the way? Yeah, it's a good one. Does it work ever? Like, very rarely. Because what you really have to do when you want to go into these different markets is understand those markets. Understand what those markets have, what they don't have, what's their preferences. What are they looking for? It's about your audience. You go into those audiences, okay, and you go into those markets that same way. And what happens is by understanding their needs, understanding their preferences, now you can actually serve the markets in the right way, in a way that's going to resonate with them. That's what I think genre is all about. This is an interesting company that we interviewed for the podcast. Daniel Webster Clark is the co-founder of a product called Romp'em, okay? And this is the male romper. Yes, it really is. Yeah? You guys out there, how many of you would wear this? There's got to be one or two. Yeah, all right, a couple, see? That's the target one. So Randy yesterday talked about designing for the extremes. That's kind of it right there. That's the extremes. But it's cool, man. I mean, I don't know that I'd wear it, but I think it's kind of neat. And so what they did was they came up with a product. They said, no, a lot of the ladies are saying we don't want men wearing that. Please don't. Look, all different preferences, but it's about understanding those preferences, all right, and saying, hey, there are a lot of people out there that want to create their own style, that want to be unique, that want to be comfortable, and they want something like this. So when I interviewed one of the co-founders, I fully expected this was a person who was going to wear this product, right? It was like something they wanted to do. Not exactly what I heard. Let me play you what he said.
I was always the guy who was kind of comfort over whatever was trending, and was sweatpants and sweatshort materials and comfortable over everything else. And so it's been fun for me to kind of, some of the other co-founders are more put in a sort of that search for what's the next thing, what's the next trend, what are they investing in from a fashion perspective. But I think the nice part about kind of my perspective has been able to understand where each of them is coming from and talk to other groups of people and kind of put myself in all of their different shoes and understanding that, I'm making a product which actually isn't probably something that I, if I wasn't the co-founder, I wouldn't be wearing it all the time, probably.
Interesting. Interesting, right? So I'm making a product that probably isn't something that I would be wearing all the time. So totally not about him. It's about the audience, about the market. Found a niche, they found something that people seem to want, and then you start to understand those preferences and provide a product to those preferences. So you kind of see how this works? These are real life examples. This isn't just Bob's theory on life. These are people who've done this stuff, and they weren't calling it all this, right? They didn't read about it in a textbook, but this is kind of how they've gone about putting together successful companies that are bringing new products to market, really bringing new products to market. So the fourth step is ideation. I'm actually, believe it or not, going to spend the least amount of time here because a lot of people wonder, where do I get new ideas from? And you can't really define it, right? It's really hard to understand. Where do I get new ideas? Well, in my estimation, the way that you get new ideas is by doing the first three steps. If you have the foundational knowledge, you have the inspiration, you know your target audience's preferences, guess what's going to come from that? Great new ideas. And sometimes the ideas are going to come first, all right, and then you're going to checkpoint with these other ones. Don't worry about the order. It doesn't have to be 1, 2, 3, 4, right? We can be a little fluid. That's part of creativity as well. Somewhere along the way, though, if you're having trouble brainstorming, you're having trouble coming up with great new ideas, do those first three things. Spend some time. Ideation, preparation, inspiration, and genre. And I guarantee you, the ideas are going to flow. But what happens when you have great new ideas, and this is the one thing that I wanted to talk about this, especially with business, is it's not about ideas that you think would be cool necessarily. It's more about ideas that people want to buy. And what ideas do people want to buy? Solutions, right? Solutions to problems. So yesterday you heard from Randy Rossi of Ballet Design. Randy, you probably didn't know I was going to do this. I'm sorry. This is what happens when you're on my podcast. But we had Randy on the podcast, okay? Randy has a successful design firm, a lot of experience here. You heard from him yesterday. And I just want to play for you what he said. Sorry about this, Randy, but, look, you said good stuff. So hold on. There we are.
Try to find the best solutions to these everyday life tasks or these job tasks, whatever the case may be. It's not an idea, it's a solution. Right? It's a behavioral change. It's a workflow change. And you need to try to gauge how much of an improvement you actually need to make. And don't be afraid, again, go into it with a level of humility. You may end up in a very different place than where you started, but you need to go into it thinking, I have something here, I just need to learn.
Okay? It's not an idea, it's a solution. So think about ideation that way. That doesn't mean that you're not going to come up with some great new ideas that didn't come from the marketplace, but always test them against the marketplace. Make sure that it's not just what you want to provide. I see this all the time, and I know you do as well, right? clever, clever people inside of your organization. Some of you are in the room. You're coming up with great new ideas for products, but you're not necessarily testing that against whether that's something that somebody wants. Is it something that people want, okay? Don't just try and push it on the marketplace. Pull it. And that's a whole different way to go. Thank you, Randy, for bearing with me on that. Great comments. Okay, so now we've got the first 4 pieces done, which is where do great ideas come from? And that's where I believe most of the great ideas that I've seen come from. But now you still have the task of expressing those ideas in a way that connects with people. Because again, if the ideas are in your head, they're not going to do anybody any good, right? They're not going to do anybody any good. So you have to express those ideas in a way that connects with people. And so this is where the next 3 steps of the process comes in. I'm going to start this part with step 5, which is arrangement. So you have a whole bunch of ideas. You have to have a way to arrange those ideas in a way that connects with people, right? And this is a really important thing. So I'm going to tell you a little story, divert from the pattern here a little bit, and tell you a little story back to my music career. And actually, when I talk about the plan A and I'm not living my plan A, I actually have had some success in music as well, okay? And you haven't seen me on the radio, you don't know my name, but I've done soundtrack work, I've done a fair bit of writing and composing, and now with the way you can put music out there on iTunes and everything else, I have music all over the place, right? And so somewhere earlier on, probably I'm going on 10, 15 years ago, I joined up with an organization called Taxi, okay? Musicians in the room, anybody heard of Taxi? Yeah, a couple of you. So Taxi is a great organization, and they're what they call an A&R organization. So what they do is they actually connect independent artists, unsigned artists, with people who publish music. So that could be record labels, it could be film producers, it could be, you know, people who own music libraries and so forth. The idea is to get you to be a professional musician, right? So they link those 2 things together. They have this great conference called the Road Rally. You ever been to the Road Rally, by the way? No? It's awesome. And so they do it in LA. And one of the great things about the Road Rally is all people just like you, right? Trying to be, you know, famous, I guess, but really more trying to make a career out of music, get more exposure for their music. And they have this one session. They sit people in a room, just like this, maybe even a little bit bigger. And you submit songs to be played, and they'll actually play a snippet of your song over the PA in a room like this. And the idea is to get a little bit of critique from some experts on the stage, but even more than that is to get the critique of the audience. And the critique of the audience comes in their reaction, okay? And so you see. So I submitted a song to be featured on that. And I sat in that room, and and it was a room looked just like this, right? So, and the first few songs that played, they were good. Music, great, no problem. But it wasn't getting like the real reaction, right, from the audience. People were cordial and they clapped and it was good. And there were like maybe 2 songs during that whole session that, oh my God, when you heard them, they just connected, right? I mean, people got up, they started dancing, you could see the emotion in people's eyes, like, whatever that composer or musician wanted that audience to feel, they felt. And when that connection was made, bam, it was like a whole different world. So I sat there in the back, I was like, oh, please don't play my song, please don't play my song, please. Because I knew that I hadn't written songs like that. My songs were good, I think, right? And I think I was a fairly decent musician and, you know, whatever. But I was writing music that like kind of I wanted to hear, that I wanted to play. Right? My songs were clocking in at 13 minutes apiece. Not necessarily radio friendly. And maybe that's why I didn't get selected to be like 13-minute songs. But at the end of the day, when I really started to analyze, what is it that made those songs connect? Then I went back and I analyzed other songs like that, right? Other songs that you hear on the radio, they're popular, that you really love, and they make these same types of connections. I said, what is it that does that? And I started to really analyze that, and this is what I found. This thing called the dramatic arc. Has anybody heard of this, the dramatic arc? Yeah? Anybody who's written stories, studied storytelling, script writing, so forth, dramatic arc is where it's at. Dramatic arc is actually, comes from another theory written by a playwright back in the 1800s named Gustav Freytag. And so some of you may have learned this in school, Freytag's pyramid. Okay, so what he did was he studied the 5-act plays of people like Shakespeare, right? And, you know, the playwrights of the time that were really super popular and whose plays were connecting with the audience. Why are they connecting with the audience? And he developed this pyramid, which then morphed into this dramatic arc. But it basically says this, that every great story, every great play, every great creative art has this story arc happening. There's an introduction, there's rising action, some conflict that has to be resolved. There's a turning point in the form of a climax, there's falling action, and then you resolve the problem. So every great story, every great movie, you've seen this in action, okay? When you see a bad movie, it's usually because something here was left out. So we've all seen movies where like they jump right into the conflict and they never introduce the characters. You don't care about the characters. You don't feel what they're going through, right? Or they introduce them too late, and so you never get that connection. Everybody experience that? Yeah? Sometimes you get movies that take you through the climax and never resolve themselves because they're setting up the part 2. Yeah? My wife made me watch 50 Shades of Grey or something like that. Anybody see that movie? Yeah, don't. I shouldn't say that. It was a fine movie, it was good. But what happened with it was, of course, as soon as you're getting into the part where like you're supposed to start getting to the climax and resolve the story, it stops. Like dead middle stops. Because there's a part 2. And I was like, what? And my wife said, well, you got to read the second book. I said, I didn't read the first book. I'm watching a movie. Like you're supposed to, the movie's supposed to tell me what happens, and it's like, this is no good. Okay, and you've seen a lot of movies like this. So when this doesn't happen, it doesn't connect. So I started studying songs this way, started music this way, and I started writing songs differently after I realized that this is what was going on. So I had 4 albums up to that point, all done under this moniker, Theater of Life. And you know, when you are a struggling musician and so forth, you go and you get CDs printed up. And so there's a minimum of 1,000 CDs. So up to this point, I had 4 albums, 1,000 CDs each, and I had 999 of each in my garage. And the other one of each my mom bought. So thank you, Mom. And it's just because, okay, I wasn't putting myself out there. Maybe it wasn't good enough. I don't know. But I know that it wasn't connecting. So I wrote this next album called Appear. And this one had some level of success. Again, not, you know, Britney Spears success. But that's not a current reference, is it? Taylor Swift. Not Taylor Swift success. But success to some extent. People were listening. I was getting good feedback on it, all right? And so I want to do something here that I don't do often. This is kind of bearing my soul. And I want to play you a clip from one of the songs on this album, all right? Now, I'll tell you, you'll see quickly one of the reasons that I'm not famous because I'm not a singer, but I sing on this song. That's not the point, so don't worry about that. But what I do want you to listen to is what the song does, okay, and how it goes through this dramatic arc. And don't worry, I know this is a business conference, right? So I'm going to get back to business, I promise you. But indulge me this because I want you to see this dramatic arc in progress. And I want you to think about every song you've heard, every creative art, every good story probably does something like this, okay? So I'll narrate a little bit of it, but here it basically goes. So I'm introducing the theme. I don't know if we have more volume here, but. I'm walking through life and I'm faking it. And I'm barely making it. But I'll make it on my own. Passion was there, but I've taken it and replaced it with a me I've never known. Working towards the climax. Why do they always believe in me? Is it hard to see I'm just an average man? Insecurity will eventually reveal the fraud I am. And then we resolve. That's it. You can applaud, yes. Thank you. Thank you for that. Because when you write a song called Insecurity and you don't get applause afterwards, it's a little problematic. But But what was I trying to do? I have these feelings, right? But it wasn't about my feelings. I wanted you to know you're not alone, because we all feel this way. We all have these insecurities, right? We're all in our jobs and in our lives, and we feel like frauds sometimes. We're like, I don't deserve this. Who am I to have this job or do this or that or the other thing? And I feel this and you feel this, and when you're not alone. And so you feel that. But the only way that I could really get that across is by using this type of a methodology. And this is standard storytelling. Okay? So how does this translate into business? Good question. Well, it's basically the same thing. If you're developing a strategy, if you're giving a presentation, here's what it is. You introduce the situation, set up the problem, develop the plan, solve the problem, show the show the results, right? It's the arc. This is it. You can take pictures of that if you want. Because this is what I see being done wrong so many times in business. People get up and do presentations, and they start with the end, right? Let's start with the results, the executive summary. We've been taught about an executive summary. Not good for presentation, sorry. You're starting with the end. What happens when you show the end first? Well, what about this? What about that? Did you think of that? That's it. Well, give me a chance to tell my story. But you're at fault because you started with the last page, right? Don't do that. Set it up. Go through this. Introduce the characters, set up the problem, develop the plan, solve the problem, show the results. That's arranging your ideas in a way that will connect with people. So there is a great guest that we had, has a company called Sprout. And Sprout makes pencils. Now, this is a long life cycle product, way over the maturity curve, right? Right? but what they've done is they've made a pencil that replaces the eraser with a gel cap with seeds in it. Why, you say? Well, because when you use up the pencil, get it down to the nub, you can turn it over, plant it, and up grows a plant. That's pretty cool, isn't it? And on the base of the pencil, you can see there's like what the seed is, so it's basil or some herb or some flower or whatever else. That's kind of neat. So it makes pencils fun again, because they were fun to begin with. Now, we're making them fun again. Bring the fun back to pencils, right? But what's interesting is what he had to say about story.
A lot of entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs are very focused on sales of their product, right? In my opinion, you should not focus on sales. Actually, you should forget about old-fashioned sales, selling products and so on. It's all about telling a good story. If you can tell a good story about your product, if you can make people understand why your product is useful, where it came from, how you can use it, and so on. That's so much better than just trying to sell a physical product. Because even though we have a patent, anybody can make a pencil with some seeds in it. It's not rocket science, right? But it's not everybody who can tell a good story and get it out there and talk about sustainability.
Pretty cool. Talk about sustainability. There's a story behind it. Anybody can make a pencil with seeds, true. Not everybody will, but you can. But it's all about telling a good story. What's the story here? The story is your kids or people could use the pencil, right? And instead of throwing it away with metal and rubber and things like that, you consume the whole thing, turn it over, plant it, turn it into a great natural resource. Sustainability. There's a story behind it. And you sell that story. It's not a pencil with seeds. And that story is the arc. And that connects. So you see how this works? Really kind of cool. All right, let's talk about the last two steps, because now with arrangement, we have a way to express ourselves, but we still haven't necessarily connected it to other people, because now you have to get it out there. And getting it out there is really these last two steps. In strategy, we're going to call this the execution part. A lot of people have trouble executing their strategy. Right? We have the plan, but then we kind of put the plan into a filing cabinet somewhere and we don't really execute it, because it was all about really just making the presentation to the boss. And then we're done. Good. Okay? The next year we'll do it again. And we'll redo it all over again. Anybody get into this cycle, by the way? Yeah? So it's really about the presentation. No, it's about the doing. The doing, that's where strategy actually really is. And so these two steps will help you to do it. The first one is orchestration. So what do I mean by orchestration? Orchestration is really only about collaborating. It's about drawing off of other resources. So many times in life, we think that we need to do things alone, right? that if we don't do it alone, we don't know everything, whatever, then we're that fraud that I sang about. But that's not true. In fact, that's not the way entrepreneurs do it. It's not the way great businesses are run. Great businesses are built on other people, bringing in other levels of expertise, right? It brings you knowledge that you don't have. It brings you confidence that you might not have had otherwise. And as a team, things are so much easier than not. So part of your strategic execution has to be this idea of orchestration. You know, obviously this is a musical term. And when I bring it into music, very, very clear, right? I could write all the songs in the world. I could do it to the storyline. Fantastic. But then I have to bring other musicians, other artists. Even if I bring other technology, someone to, you know, mix the song, or other technology to mimic the sounds of the instruments that I want. Better than that are actually bringing in the other musicians who will add their own flavor, add their own expertise, and make the work continue to come to life more and more. Those ideas, right, will now become better and bigger and stronger. You don't have to do it alone. There's a great product called Glove Sticks, and we had the founder of this company on our show. When we had her on the show, Krista Woods, great guest, she had won Today Show's Next Big Thing, so they kind of do an entrepreneurial show and so forth. It was a great product. She's since been on Shark Tank and got a deal with one of the sharks. And so this is a product that's really, really successful. And what it basically is, the problem statement was that she has kids in lacrosse and hockey and so forth, and they have stinky equipment. Pretty simple. I mean, yeah, some people are saying, oh yeah, it does. Wow. My daughter just started ice hockey. And I used to play ice hockey myself a little bit, but she just started it. And our garage is like one big clothesline for hockey equipment, because if we put that stuff back in the bag, oh my God. And so she had this same problem, said there's got to be a better way, and came up with this product called Glove Sticks, which essentially is a silver-infused product that will wick moisture away from the equipment and also stop the growth of bacteria, which is where the odor apparently comes from. All right? Not a scientist, not anything. She just knew she had a problem, and she had a network of people, and she wanted to draw on that network of people to help her bring this idea to life. So let's hear what she had to say.
I used my skills that I currently possessed in relationships and people to get me to have an e-commerce product that's on the market that I know that I have no skills in. Yeah. So I had zero skills in website design, prototypes, product logistics. Oh my gosh, like it's so completely overwhelming. But I used the skills that I was born with, my natural assets, which is people, right? So I've turned my business, my Glove Sticks business, into a business that's not about product. Yeah. It's about people.
Interesting. This is a product, right? This is a person who invented a product. She said, I turned my business into a business that's not about product, it's about people, because she can't do it alone. She orchestrated that idea into something real by drawing upon a network of people that she can collaborate with. And she goes on in the show to explain who some of those people are. But really interesting. So if you're thinking that you have to do this alone, think again. You don't, right? You don't. Okay, so now you've drawn upon your people. So let's go back to the orchestra. And so what do we have at the orchestra? We practice, we've rehearsed. Now you still have to put on the show. You gotta put on the show. And so in the creative space, again, it's nothing if you don't share it. And this is a hard part, by the way. Coming from that world, I could tell you it's really, really easy to create stuff inside your living room and show it to, again, your mom, right? She's always going to be your biggest fan. Mom, dad, whoever, right? They're your biggest fan. And by the way, if you want real feedback on your music or art or something like that, don't show your family, because you're never going to get, oh yeah, Bob, that's fantastic. That's great, right? And then you play it for some stranger, they're like, what? So the idea, though, is you've got to share it. You've got to produce it. And you've got to take this thing and bring it to life. And the thing that stops us from doing this in the arts or in business is fear. We're afraid. Okay? We're afraid. Any number of things can make us afraid. Usually it's a fear of that failure. We heard that yesterday in the keynote, right? Don't be afraid to fail. It's hard. Yes, it's against a natural human emotion. Somebody said that. But it does lead to success. When that question was asked yesterday, I was thinking about, kind of how I would answer that, right? And I don't want to steal anybody's thunder, but the way that I kind of thought about overcoming fear is learning to ride a bike. when I was moving from corporate into small business, my brother, who's I use as a mentor, who's not afraid, and he's done so many great things in his life, he said to me, you know, you're so paralyzed by fear sometimes, you can't be afraid to drop the bike. What does that mean? That means that when you learn to ride a bike, right, you're afraid until you fall. And then you realize, it wasn't that bad. And I got a scrape and I get back up, and then you could ride the bike. Yeah? It's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. So when I think about overcoming your fear and why you have to push past that natural human emotion not to fail, it's because without that failure, it's going to be so overwhelming to you. Like, what happens if I fail? Not that much, as it turns out. Okay? Not that much. You got to push past your fear. And that's really what production is about. So there's another person we had on the podcast, Carlos Vega. He's the founder of a company called Jersey Italian Gravy. Has anybody seen this product? It's an awesome product. Yeah. By the way, gravy is what this is called. Yeah? Anybody from the Northeast Italian heritage like me? Yeah? We call it gravy. You call it sauce? It's gravy. It's got meat and deliciousness all throughout. It's the most fantastic thing in the world. And so in the Northeast, that's what we call it. And so he had an idea for a product. He had a good product. But how many jarred sauces are there out there? Like thousands? I don't know. A person from Campbell's probably could tell you right away. I don't know, but I know there's a lot, right? I know there's a lot. And so he was told every step of the way, dude, this is jarred sauce, it's not going to work. But he had a concept, he had a story, all this stuff came to pass, and he said, I want to tell the story of Nona's gravy, my Sunday night dinner, I want to bring that to your table. It's not about the jarred sauce, it's about the experience that he wanted people to have. It's about the brand and the label and everything that goes with it, and the way he supports it. That's what he wanted to bring. And he pushed past all that fear, and he brought a successful product to market in a very crowded space. So let's hear what he had to say.
Because I've been to shows where people have brought me little samples of a barbecue sauce. Yeah. And I said to myself, buddy, this has to get on the shelf. And this is how you're going to do it. Try this. But they're worried about it. They're always worried about it. Yeah. Well, I got my job, my kids, my this and that. And that's kind of the brakes right there. They need to let that emergency brake go and just go straight. You can do it. Figure it out. It's going to happen. Just believe in that.
Pretty inspirational words, right? They need to let that emergency brake go. In the words of my paisan, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. It's okay, right? That's production. Put on a good show. Make it work. Really, saying like just go out there and you know, give people a crappy performance. Put on a good show, but don't be afraid. Don't be blinded or paralyzed by that fear. That's the last part of strategy. So when you hear about people that say we can't execute our strategy, that's usually why. So that's it, right? That's your creative process. Preparation, inspiration, genre, ideation, arrangement, orchestration, and production. Not your typical strategy presentation, but do you see how this is where strategy is built? It's about tapping into your creativity. I'm not saying the frameworks are bad, or the books are bad, or the academics, or the school, or the MBAs. They're great. They're great learning resources. Just don't use them as a right or wrong. Okay? Don't think that if you haven't done those things, you can't develop a strategy. Or worse, don't think that if you have done those things, that that's the only right way to do strategy. Because then you're going to come up with the same strategy that everyone else before you did. And those are not the ones that succeed. Tap into your creativity. Use something like this. And I hope I've inspired you a little bit to do that. So a couple of resources. Making It Real is the podcast we have been referencing. So those of you who listen to podcasts, or even if you don't, go to iTunes, subscribe. You could also go to makingitreal.net. All the episodes are up there. It's about bringing new products to market, and I'm sure you'll get a lot of great advice. We do it every Friday, and we have no end in sight. So go ahead and subscribe. If you love it, give us a review. We'd love that too. I have another podcast that you might find of interest, more to the point of strategy. And so we do a lot of workshops through Secret Learning Networks, the company that Stephen and I both work for. And in those workshops, we ask people to ask us questions about strategy. What's on your mind about strategy? And I answer those questions on this podcast, about 10 minutes out every Wednesday. Totally free resources. So if you're on Apple devices, go to iTunes. If you're on Android devices, Google Play or Stitcher are the places you can get those. Also, everything that I talked about is in the book that I wrote, Creative Strategy Generation. So you can get that on Amazon, Kindle if you're interested. We also have a table out here, and you can take a look at the book if you'd like. You could purchase it there as well. We have a few copies, not too many here, but we definitely can get it on Amazon and so forth. So feel free to check that out if you're interested in learning more about this process that I talk about. And then, of course, for me, connect, LinkedIn, right? All these different places. Bob Caporale, you can see the spelling. It's Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, Google+, all the same. It's also all available from my website, bobcaporale.com, so you can hear more of my music if you're so inclined and learn more about all the stuff that I'm up to. And even more important than that, if you are a product manager or you have a product management team and you're interested in training workshops for product managers or product marketers or on the subject of product strategy, Sequent Learning Networks, we do all of that. So come visit our table, also our website, sequentlearning.com, and you could always email me as well. And this information, I think, is downloadable from the app in the PDF that I provided, so you can find more about me there. But it has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you.